Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the bustling city of Harlington, the halls of the county courthouse hummed with the familiar murmurs. Judges, lawyers, and clerks moved with a well-established routine, where every move seemed predictable, every decision already written in the pages of the case files. But today, something would break the monotony. Amara Johnson, a 17-year-old black girl, entered the courtroom. Her eyes shone with quiet determination, but her heart was pounding. Wrongly accused of petty theft from a downtown bookstore, she knew that every word, every gesture could decide her fate. Yet she had no intention of being intimidated. Opposite her sat Richard Whitman, a judge in his 60s, known for his arrogance and sometimes hasty judgment. He had a habit of mocking young people, especially when they seemed insolent or different from what he considered the norm. His reputation for condescension was well known, and today he seemed determined to test the young girl's patience. What Whitman didn't know was that Amara was no ordinary teenager. Behind her 17 years lay the sharp intelligence and moral strength of Monique Johnson, her mother, a lawyer respected for her victories against influential figures and for her fierce defense of justice. Amara had inherited from her mother not only her sharp mind, but also her determination to fight, even in the most unjust situations. As the judge's gavel was about to clang and the courtroom prepared for what seemed like a routine arraignment, no one suspected that on that day, a simple trial would become an unforgettable lesson for all, about dignity, respect, and courage in the face of prejudice. The courtroom was silent except for the rustling of papers and the hurried footsteps of the bailiffs. Amara Johnson she entered, head held high, though her heart was pounding. She wore a simple but neat outfit, dark jeans, a beige sweater, and clean sneakers. Her hair was tied back in a discreet ponytail, revealing a face of determination despite her apprehension. The judge Richard Whitman barely looked up from his documents when the bailiff announced appearance of Miss Amara Johnson, accused of theft from the Harper & Company bookstore. Whitman, a man in his 60s with a face marked by years of authority, scrutinized her with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Miss Johnson, he began sharply, you seem very young to be here. Do you realize the gravity of your situation? Amara took a deep breath before answering, her clear, confident voice echoing through the room. Yes, Your Honor. I am aware of the accusations, but I want to make it clear that I did not steal anything and that I wish to explain my version of events. Whitman gave a slight sarcastic smile, tapping his table. Oh, sure, teenagers always have an explanation. But the law doesn't discriminate based on age, does it? Amara remained calm, but her gaze betrayed a spark of defiance. She knew he was trying to intimidate her. With dignity, she replied. I understand, Your Honor. I only ask that you listen to the facts before drawing any conclusions. The room, previously indifferent, began to sense a slight shift in the air. The courtroom staff and a few lawyers were watching this unexpected confrontation, a teenage girl daring to speak with such maturity in front of a judge known for his arrogance. Whitman, slightly irritated but intrigued, frowned. Very well, Miss Johnson. You'll have your chance. But be brief, we have a busy schedule. Amara nodded respectfully, aware that the slightest misstep could work against her. She prepared to calmly state the truth, never giving in to the judge's provocation. This initial exchange laid the foundation for a confrontation that would quickly exceed the expectations of everyone in the courtroom. Judge Whitman leaned slightly over his desk, a sarcastic smile on his face. Miss Johnson, I must say. He began, his voice trailing off, it's rare to see someone your age claim to know the law better than those who have spent their entire lives in this courtroom. A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Some spectators exchanged surprised glances, while others waited to see how the teenager would react. Amara, undeterred, looked up at him and calmly replied. Your Honor, I do not claim to know the law better than you. I simply ask that my rights be respected and that the facts be taken into account before any judgment. Whitman chuckled softly, tapping his gavel on the table. Well-chosen words for a teenager, but sometimes reality is different than what we imagine. He turned to the witnesses present and made a remark aloud, loud enough for the girl to hear clearly. Maybe if she had been better supported at home, we wouldn't be in this situation. Amara felt a pang of humiliation, but she didn't lower her eyes. She knew that reacting angrily would only make the situation worse. She took a deep breath and replied, "Your Honor, I'm not here to discuss my upbringing or my family. I'm here to clarify the facts." His calm and maturity surprised the room. Even some of the court employees, accustomed to Whitman's arrogance, began to lean in a little more closely. The judge, irritated by his audacity, frowned. "All right, you'll get your chance. Speak. But be concise." Amara nodded and began to clearly and methodically explain what had happened at the bookstore. She detailed the situation, the witnesses, and the contradictions in the accusations against her. Her voice never wavered. The entire courtroom, expecting a one-sided confrontation in which the judge would humiliate the teenager without opposition, was now hanging on his every word. For the first time, Whitman felt that the outcome of this hearing might be out of his control. Amara took a deep breath before calmly removing her phone from her pocket. With a discreet gesture, she scrolled through the photos and notes she had taken during her visit to the bookstore. Every detail was meticulously documented, the location of the books, the witnesses present, and even the exact sequence of events. "Your Honor," she began confidently, "I have taken care to note what actually happened. The evidence does not match the charges against me. Allow me to present it." Whitman frowned, slightly surprised. He hadn't expected a teenage girl to be so methodical and prepared. "Very well, Miss Johnson, but be quick. We have other matters to attend to." Amara placed her phone on the desk and projected a few photos and notes. She explained clearly how the witnesses had contradicted each other and how the surveillance cameras showed another person near the allegedly stolen item. Each sentence was measured and precise, demonstrating her ability to analyze the situation objectively. The murmurs in the courtroom intensified. The lawyers present leaned forward to get a better look at the evidence. Even some of the previously indifferent witnesses became attentive and intrigued by Amara's maturity and preparation. Whitman, irritated but intrigued, tried to interrupt. "Miss, these details, it's not up to you to decide what is relevant." Amara looked him straight in the eyes. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I am not deciding. I am simply pointing out the facts and the contradictions so that the truth may be heard." Judge Whitman felt a shiver of discomfort. This young woman wasn't just polite and respectful, she possessed an intelligence and clarity that far surpassed what he had expected. For the first time in his long career, he was beginning to wonder if he had underestimated someone simply because of their age and skin color. Silence reigned for a moment in the room. Amara, aware of everyone's attention, continued. "If I may, Your Honor, I can also cite some legal precedents that apply directly to this situation." Whitman swallowed. The weight of the audience's eyes, the murmurs of respect, and the teenager's quiet confidence made him realize that the hearing would not go as planned. Amara was no ordinary teenager, she was determined to stand up for her truth, no matter how arrogant the judge in front of her might be. Judge Whitman felt his authority waver. Until now, he was used to young people barely arguing their point of view, intimidated by the sheer power of his black robe and gavel. But Amara was unlike any other. Her calm voice, solid evidence, and relentless logic highlighted her own weaknesses and contradictions in the case. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice a little harsher, "you speak with great assurance, but are you aware that the room is full of witnesses who say the opposite of what you are saying?" Amara nodded, unperturbed. "Yes, Your Honor. That's why I took care to note down their exact statements and compare them with the library records. The contradictions are clear." Whitman felt a pang of irritation. He stood up slightly, tapping his gavel on his desk. "You seem to know better than all these adults what happened." "It's not a question of knowing better," Amara replied, her voice firm but polite, "it's a question of truth and objective facts." The entire courtroom hung on her every word. The murmurs grew louder, some visitors exchanging admiring glances. Even the courtroom staff, accustomed to the judge's mockery, were beginning to understand that this teenager was standing up to an authority figure with rare courage. Whitman, embarrassed by the growing attention and aware of the seriousness of his earlier mockery, tried to regain control. Very well, but you have to understand that age and experience count for something. Amara crossed her arms calmly. Your Honor, I respect your experience. But I believe that justice consists above all in examining the facts without prejudice. The judge felt a wave of unease pass through him. He had never encountered someone who defended their innocence with such rigor and dignity. A part of him began to doubt how easily he thought he could humiliate this teenager in public. For the first time in his career, Whitman realized that his reputation as an unwavering judge could be tested by a single young woman. And he had no idea that the story would soon take an even more unexpected turn. As Amara calmly finished presenting her evidence, a murmur erupted from the back of the courtroom. One of the attorneys present approached Judge Whitman and whispered a few words in his ear. Your Honor, do you realize that this teenager? Whitman narrowed his eyes and frowned, his mind trying to grasp what he had just heard. What? He asked, his voice betraying both disbelief and tension. The lawyer repeated, more distinctly. Miss Johnson, you know. Monique Johnson's daughter. The lawyer who won several cases against influential figures in this city. Whitman's face changed instantly. The arrogance and contempt he had displayed moments earlier transformed into astonishment. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Wait, you are Amara Johnson? He asked, unable to hide his astonishment. Amara looked up at him, calm and impassive. Yes, Your Honor. A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone present seemed suspended in that moment, aware that the dynamics of the hearing had just shifted. Judge Whitman, confronted by the daughter of a respected and feared lawyer, suddenly felt the weight of her condescension and mockery. He looked down at his desk, searching for a way to compose himself, but the discomfort was palpable. The audience, which until now had watched his humiliations with a mixture of surprise and curiosity, now sensed the judge's discomfort. Even some of the witnesses and lawyers who had previously remained silent began to murmur among themselves. Whitman took a deep breath, trying to find his words, but the pride that had driven him to humiliate Amara now clashed with the reality of his true identity. He understood that he could no longer behave in the same way and that every word he spoke from now on would be carefully scrutinized. Amara, aware of the impact of her revelation, remained dignified and silent. Her calm and assured posture, combined with the judge's astonishment, made this moment a decisive turning point. Whitman knew he had been taken by surprise and that his reputation could be damaged if he did not react with prudence and fairness. Whitman stood frozen for a few seconds, his eyes scanning the room, feeling the gaze of the witnesses, the lawyers, and the audience bearing down on him. The condescension he had displayed a few moments earlier was gone, replaced by a mixture of embarrassment and caution. Miss Johnson. He began hesitantly, I recognize that my previous remarks were inappropriate. Amara raised her head gently, expressing neither anger nor triumph. She left only a slight silence, imposing her moral authority with her dignity. Your accusations and mockery, Your Honor, she continued calmly, do not reflect justice. Justice consists of examining the facts, not judging by appearance or age. Whitman took a deep breath, aware that every word he spoke would be scrutinized. He knew his mockery could not only tarnish his reputation, but also create professional turmoil, especially now that he knew who Amara's mother was. You are right, Miss Johnson, he said finally, avoiding looking directly at her face. I publicly apologize for my inappropriate remarks and for any form of humiliation I may have inflicted on you. I will re-evaluate the facts of this case with the utmost impartiality. A murmur of approval went through the room. Lawyers and witnesses watched this turn of events with astonishment. Whitman had never before offered such a public apology. Amara nodded with dignity. She knew that an apology didn't erase the mockery, but it did signal a change. The judge, now aware of his own error, had to act fairly. Then, calmly and precisely, she spoke again to conclude. Thank you, Judge. I simply wish that the truth and the facts be at the center of this hearing. Judge Whitman, touched by the teenager's composure and maturity, felt for the first time truly tested by a court appearance. He knew he had to put his pride aside and focus solely on justice. The audience, witnessing this interaction, understood that the situation had just changed. The young girl who had been humiliated now stood as a model of courage and dignity, and the judge, once domineering and arrogant, now had to show himself humble and impartial. After Judge Whitman's public apology, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed dramatically. The murmurs turned to a respectful silence, all eyes on Amara. She stood tall, calm, and confident, ready to conclude her defense with the same dignity that had guided her from the beginning. Amara took a deep breath and summarized the key points of her argument. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. The contradictions in the testimonies, the absence of a camera confirming the accusation, and the evidence I have presented show that I committed no theft. I respectfully request that the charges be dropped." Whitman quickly scanned the documents, knowing that every point the girl presented was accurate and irrefutable. The witnesses and lawyers who had witnessed the incident exchanged astonished glances. It was rare in this room for a 17-year-old defendant to so captivate a hearing with his clarity and mastery of the case. After a moment of heavy silence, Whitman struck his gavel. "In light of the evidence presented and the strong defense, the charges against Ms. Amara Johnson are dismissed." A slight breath of relief rippled through the room. The murmurs turned into quiet applause. Some spectators stood to silently congratulate the teenager, impressed by her courage and maturity. Amara, though pleased with the decision, maintained her dignified posture. She knew that her victory was measured not only by the dismissal of the charges, but also by the respect she had earned by standing with integrity and determination in the face of an arrogant judge. Whitman, for his part, remained silent for a moment. He felt the lesson he had just received sinking deep into him. He had been forced to acknowledge his mistake, to reconsider his prejudices, and to understand that justice demanded impartiality, respect, and listening, regardless of the age or color of the accused. That day in that courtroom, Amara Johnson won more than just a legal victory. She imposed dignity, intelligence, and truth, reminding everyone that courage and resilience can triumph over arrogance and prejudice. After the hearing, Whitman remained in his office, alone with his thoughts. For the first time in years, he felt a mixture of embarrassment and deep reflection. The arrogance and contempt he had shown toward Amara now seemed ridiculous and misplaced. He thought back over every word he'd spoken, every condescending laugh he'd let out. His hubris had nearly compromised the very integrity of the justice system he was supposed to represent. And most of all, he realized how much he'd underestimated the strength and intelligence of a teenage girl, simply because of her age and skin color. Whitman noted in his personal notebook, "Today I learned that no experience, no title, justifies disrespect or arrogance. Justice is not measured by authority, but by fairness and listening." In the following days, his colleagues noticed a subtle but real change. Whitman was no longer the condescending and sarcastic judge they knew. He listened more, asked thoughtful questions, and weighed each decision with more care and humility. Some lawyers, surprised by this change, discreetly questioned him. "What happened to make you change like this?" "A teenage girl reminded me what justice really is," he replied simply. Amara, meanwhile, continued her teenage life, but with a strengthened confidence. She knew that her victory was not only personal, it had also left a lasting lesson in the mind of a judge and in the memories of those who had attended the hearing. Whitman realized then that this incident would remain etched in his memory for the rest of his career. He had confronted his own arrogance and learned that respect, patience, and listening were the true pillars of justice. That day, a teenage girl not only stood up for her own truth, but she also forever changed the perspective of a man who thought he knew it all. Shortly after Judge Whitman's decision, the courtroom slowly emptied, leaving Amara alone for a few moments to catch her breath. She knew the experience had strengthened her, but she was also aware that her victory would only be complete when she shared this moment with her mother. Monique Johnson, her lawyer and mentor, then entered the room. Her eyes shone with pride and emotion as she saw her daughter standing there, calm and dignified, despite the humiliation she had suffered earlier. She approached Amara and whispered, "I'm so proud of you, my darling. You've shown what it means to stand up for the truth with courage and respect." Amara smiled slightly, a mixture of relief and pride. "Thank you, Mom. I couldn't have done otherwise. I had to stand up straight, no matter what." Monique placed an affectionate hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You not only stood up for your truth, but you also showed everyone here what dignity and strength mean. The lessons you teach today, even to this judge, will stay with them for a long time." Whitman, watching discreetly from his office, felt a deep respect rise within him. Monique's presence reinforced the impact of the lesson he had just learned. He realized that the teenager had inherited her mother's tenacity and intelligence, and that these qualities could not be ignored or ridiculed. Amara and her mother left the courtroom together, hand in hand. The afternoon sun lit up their faces, symbolizing a new beginning, not only for Amara, but also for the judge who had been confronted with his own arrogance. In that silent walk out of the courtroom, Amara understood that the real victory lay not only in the dropping of the charges, but in the respect and recognition she had earned through her dignity and courage. That day, mother and daughter shared more than just a legal victory. They cemented an unbreakable bond and left a lasting impression on everyone who attended the hearing. A few weeks after the hearing, Amara Johnson's story spread throughout the town of Harlington. Local newspapers and social media admired the teenager's courage and dignity in the face of a judge known for his arrogance. Many praised her maturity, her mastery of the law, and her ability to remain calm despite public ridicule. Whitman, for his part, experienced a lasting change in his judgment. Every time he sat on the bench, he remembered the teenage girl who had taught him a valuable lesson: authority without respect and impartiality is worthless. His decisions became more careful, more thoughtful, and he showed more compassion to all who appeared before him. Inspired by this experience, Amara continued her studies with renewed enthusiasm. She knew her voice could make a difference and that dignity and truth were powerful weapons in the face of injustice. Her mother, Monique, remained her guide and supporter, proud to see her daughter transform a difficult moment into an example of courage and maturity. In the city, residents now spoke of the trial not just as a legal case, but as a life lesson. Young people, in particular, were inspired to defend their rights with respect and intelligence, while authority figures became aware of the importance of judging fairly and humbly. That day, Harlington understood that true power lies not in dominance or arrogance, but in courage, dignity, and truth. Amara Johnson had not only won her case, but she had also made a lasting difference in the hearts and minds of those who had witnessed her incredible strength. And for Judge Whitman, it was a constant reminder: justice is not just a matter of the law, it is a matter of respect, listening, and humanity. A lesson he would never forget.